Hello, second graders. Welcome to Chapter 4 of Chocolate Fever by Robert Kimmel Smith. Chapter 4, Pop! Dirt breeds germs. That's very relevant to what's going on right now. Dirt breeds germs, Nurse Molly Farthing would often say, and germs have a nasty way of making healthy people ill. Naturally, the infirmary, or the wellness center, of PS 123 was always spotless because Nurse Molly Farthing wouldn't have it any other way. And naturally, as Miss Kimmelfarber and Henry rushed through the door that morning, she made both of them go back and wipe their feet on the mat. "And don't bring any of your cocoa in here," Nurse Farthing added. She sniffed the air loudly. "Cocoa?" said Mrs. Kimmelfarber. "Don't think I don't smell it," Nurse Farthing said. "Please, Nurse Farthing," said Mrs. Kimmelfarber. "We have an emergency on our hands. This is Henry Green. He's breaking out in a rash of some sort." "So I see," said Nurse Farthing. Nurse Farthing has a very similar voice to Mrs. Kimmelfarber, doesn't she, second graders? "So I see," said Nurse Farthing. She sat Henry down in a chair and turned on a bright light. Pushing her spectacles, which are glasses, down to the tip of her nose, she bent close to Henry and looked him over. It's a rash, all right," she said at last. "Peculiar. Looks like little brown spots all over." "Exactly," Mrs. Kimmelfarber said. "But what is it?" "Have you ever had measles, Henry?" Nurse Farthing asked. "Yeah," said Henry, "when I was 5. "Chickenpox?" "When I was 3.5. "Then I would say you have an unidentified rash. And frankly, I don't like the look of it." Henry, who up until now was merely frightened, began to feel a little terrified. Nurse Farthing laid her cool hand on his arm and steadied him. There, dear," she said. "Nothing to be frightened of. I'm sure it's not serious. How do you feel?" "Not very good," said Henry. "Warm?" "No." "Cold?" "No." "Dizzy?" "No," said Henry. "I just feel strange." "Oh, you poor dear," said Nurse Molly Farthing. "You really must be frightened." She ran her fingers through his hair and patted the back of Henry's neck. Somehow this made him feel a little better. "Pop!" "Did you say something?" asked Nurse Farthing. "No, ma'am." "Pop!" "What's that noise then?" she asked. "It sounds like something going pop." "I heard it too," said Henry. "So did I," said Mrs. Kimmelfarber. "Pop, pop, pop!" Now they all heard it. The sound of popping filled the infirmary. Little pops and bigger pops and poppity-pop-pops kept popping. Henry looked at his arm, and in an instant he knew where the noise was coming from. His little brown spots were growing bigger and bigger. They were popping out all over him. No longer the size of freckles. They were as big as the chocolate bits his mother used for making cakes and cookies. He could feel them popping out of his arms and face, could feel them growing under his shirt. In less time than it takes to tell it, Henry Green was covered with little brown lumps from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. That's way too much chocolate, wouldn't you say, second graders? Well, I could read Chapter 5. Nah, I don't think so. What? Oh, okay. Chapter 5. Calling Dr. Fargo. In later years, Henry couldn't remember who screamed first. All he could recall was that both he and Mrs. Kimmelfarber were yelling their heads off, and that Nurse Molly Farthing was as cool as a cantaloupe. "Calm down now, both of you," she said. "Mrs. Kimmelfarber, you go and call Mr. Green on the phone. Tell her that we're taking Henry to the city hospital. Mrs. Green is Henry's mother, remember. Mrs. Kimmelfarber didn't move. She just stood there with her mouth open, staring at Henry. You scoot now, insisted Nurse Farthing in a stern tone. Shush! Off with you. And you, Henry Green, she said as Mrs. Kimmelfarber left the room, you are coming with me. Let's go now. Quietly. Calmly. She took his hand, and once again Henry noticed that it felt good and somehow made him feel better. He kept holding her cool hand as they left the school. All the way to the hospital, as the taxi sped along, Henry held fast to the calm, steady hand of Nurse Molly Farthing. In fact, it wasn't until he had been checked by 2 different doctors and was waiting to be examined by the hospital's chief of children's medicine, Dr. Fargo, that he dared to let go. What? Said Dr. Fargo as he came bounding into the examining room. He was a small, round man with a bushy white mustache and a confused look on his face. What have we here, eh? He said. Boy looks like he fell into a mud puddle. He leaned down so close to Henry's nose that Henry could smell his puffy breath. It smelled like peppermints. Didn't fall in a mud puddle, though, did you, lad? No, sir. I didn't think so, said Dr. Fargo. Too bad. Would have explained what those big brown spots were all over you. Well, then, he said, turning to Nurse Molly Farthing, tell me things. You're not going to believe this, Doctor, Nurse Farthing began as she told Dr. Fargo about the events of the morning. I am not going to believe this, Dr. Fargo repeated when she had finished. It's impossible. No rash in the whole history of rashes ever appeared so fast, or grew so big, or popped out with a noise you could hear. Impossible. Well, it happened, said Nurse Farthing. Well, so I see. Well, we'll soon get to the bottom of this, or my name's not, what's my name again? Dr. Fargo, I believe, said Henry. Well, pleased to meet you, son. I'm Dr. Fargo, said Dr. Fargo, and he shook Henry's hand. Ought to do something about those big brown spots, don't you think? Yes, sir, said Henry, who was beginning to feel confused himself. Dr. Fargo took Henry into the examining room and had him sit on the table and switched on the big lamp. For a full 5 minutes, he said nothing but, and aha, as he poked and prodded Henry. He looked at every big brown spot and at all the bare spots in between the brown spots. He looked with a magnifying glass and without a magnifying glass, in Henry's eyes and ears and nose and even under his tongue. Finally, he said, I don't know any more than when I started. They look just like your typical big brown spots to me. Except, of course, in the whole history of the civilized world, there has never been a case of big brown spots before. Doctor, I'm frightened, said Henry. Well, I'm Dr. Fargo, said Dr. Fargo. That much I do know. Now, what I'd like to do is get you to know more about those brown spots of yours. Boy, he doesn't have a very good bedside manner, does he, second graders? He wet the tip of a cotton swab and brushed it gently against one of the big brown spots on Henry's right arm. Ow! Said Henry. Oh, did that hurt? No. Then why'd you say ow? Because I thought it was going to hurt. Huh, I see, said Dr. Fargo. Shaking his head, he put the cotton swab into a glass jar. Take this to the laboratory at once. Toot sweet, he said to one of his assistants, and the man rushed out of the room. In a few minutes, we'll know more about those big brown spots of yours, the doctor said. That's quick laboratory results, isn't it? Second graders. Hands behind his back, he began to pace the room. Suddenly he stopped, nose in the air. Who has been eating a chocolate bar in my office? He demanded. No one answered. Dr. Fargo's nose twitched from side to side, as he sniffed the air. "I smell candy," he said. "Someone's been eating a candy bar. A chocolate candy bar." Just then the telephone rang, and Dr. Fargo bounded across the room to answer it. "What? What?" he said into the phone. "Are you sure?" His white mustache bounced up and down as Dr. Fargo sank slowly into a chair. He put the telephone down, a look of amazement on his face. "Chocolate," he said. That was the lab on the phone, and those big brown spots, they said, are pure chocolate." "Chocolate?" gasped Nurse Fowling. "Chocolate?" exclaimed Henry Green.
"Chocolate?"
echoed Dr. Fargo's assistant.
"Exactly,"
said Dr. Fargo. "The boy, it seems, is nothing more than a walking candy bar." Tomorrow, Chapter 6. Catch that boy. Second graders, I'll see you tomorrow.